Alright, get ready for this one. Imagine pizza. Yes, pizza being classified as a vegetable. Or how about Subway's bread technically being cake? Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, these bizarre food rulings are actually real. And today, we're diving deep into how and why these crazy classifications even exist. So stay tuned. I'm your host Ryan Socash, and you're watching Eats History. Believe it or not, both ketchup and pizza have become vegetables in the United States, but not because of their nutritional value or the tomatoes they contain. Instead, this classification stems from budget cuts, bureaucratic loopholes, and industry lobbying. But to better understand how pizza earned its vegetable status, we first need to look back at a time when ketchup was granted that same strange classification. In the early 1980s, the Reagan administration sought to reduce government spending, including significant cuts to the school lunch and child nutrition programs. The result was a search for cheaper alternatives to existing meal standards, leading to controversial redefinitions of what could be considered a vegetable. In 1981, ketchup and other condiments were proposed as subsidies for actual vegetables in school lunches to help save costs. The backlash was immediate. Critics argued that ketchup, with its high sugar content and minimal nutritional value, was far from a fresh vegetable, despite the fact that it was intended to replace vegetables. Despite the uproar, the policy nearly went into effect before it was rolled back. Still, the incident became infamous as a symbol of misguided government policy. Fast forward to 2011, and a similar controversy arose when pizza was classified as a vegetable. This time, the reasoning came down to the tomato paste used in school pizzas. Federal nutrition guidelines suggested that a serving of vegetables should contain at least half a cup of tomato paste. However, the pizza served in US schools typically used only 2 tablespoons per slice, far less than required by law. Despite this, lobbying efforts by frozen pizza manufacturers, the salt industry, and potato farmers successfully argued that the small amount of tomato paste should still be a vegetable serving. The result? Pizza, like ketchup before it, became a vegetable in the eyes of the school lunch program. The debates over ketchup and pizza as a vegetable highlight how economic pressure and lobbying can sometimes trump common sense regarding public health. The consequence of these decisions reverberated through the school lunch system, raising questions about the priorities behind feeding the nation's children. Not only ketchup and pizza have fallen into these bizarre categories, crucially, their ingredients, such as cheese and tomatoes, also have quirks in the United States. Despite being a bona fide fruit, tomatoes have long been considered vegetables in the US for tariff reasons. The decisions date back to 1893 when the Supreme Court ruled that tomatoes should be considered a vegetable under US customs regulations. In addition, tomatoes are still considered a vegetable because of their culinary use. Then there's cheese, or what's often called cheese. You see, the US has strict guidelines on what can be labeled real cheese. So many cheese products on store shelves, especially those with bright yellow slices wrapped in plastic, are categorized as, quote, processed cheese, or cheese products. American cheese, for example, is made by blending real cheese with additional ingredients like milk proteins and preservatives. Because of these additives, it doesn't meet the FDA standards to be called pure cheese, and thus it must be labeled differently. These processed products may taste like cheese, but they technically aren't. Cheese is engineered food designed for convenience and longer shelf life, but this comes at the cost of quality and sometimes authenticity. The same applies to other cheese-like substances in ready-made meals and fast food, and they often blur the line between real dairy and heavily modified substitutes. And as if that's not enough, even products labeled as, quote, natural cheese can be scrutinized, with debates over how long they need to age or what ingredients they contain. Believe it or not, even bread has run into its legal battles. Take Subway's bread, for example. In 2020, a court in Ireland ruled that Subway's bread contained way too much sugar and that it did not qualify as bread legally under Irish tax law. In Ireland, bread is considered a staple food, subject to lower taxes, but only if it meets specific nutritional standards. According to the court, the sugar content in Subway's rolls was so high that it was actually classified closer to a confectionery or pastry rather than actual bread. So how did this happen? Well, bread in the US can legally contain much higher levels of sugar than what other countries allow. Many fast food chains like Subway rely on these formulas to make their products taste better, even if they stray from what people traditionally consider bread. With that in mind, in Ireland, where bread has stricter legal definitions, Subway's version didn't pass the test. This ruling has led to some very amusing revelations. For example, every time you order a Subway sandwich in Ireland, the ingredients are between what is technically 2 pieces of cake, which might be a fact that you could have done without. So we'll leave it there for today, but please support the channel by subscribing and don't miss our episode about why airplanes had in-flight buffets. Until next time, this is Ryan Socash signing off.